And it's not, and no EV person is sitting here being like 100% of the US fleet is going to be EV. Even if 20% of the EV of the US fleet, so all vehicles on the road are EV, that is 20% of cars need to be able to have a place to get fuel, and that is EV charging. So we think that's really important. And then as we see public programs go away, we really need to prioritize getting private investment in the EV space and to not be scared of the space. The space is certainly still growing, and the underwriting is not simple, but it's certainly achievable.
Are you speeding the energy transition? Here at the Clean Power Hour, our host Tim Montague bring you the best in solar, batteries, and clean technologies every week. Want to go deeper into decarbonization? We do too. We're here to help you understand and command the commercial, residential, and utility, solar, wind, and storage industries. So let's get to it. Together we can speed the energy transition.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 8 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. Charging infrastructure for electrification of transportation. That is the topic we're taking a deep dive on today. Welcome to the Clean Power Hour. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and a review on Apple or Spotify and tell a friend about the show. My guest today is Aubrey Gunnels. She is the CEO and founder of 3V Infrastructure. Welcome to the show.
Right. Happy to be here, Tim.
This is a unique conversation. I've never really geeked out on infrastructure, on charging infrastructure, so I'm very happy to bring this. Of course, we solar and storage professionals are also electrification professionals, and charging infrastructure is part and parcel of the work that we do in the C&I solar and storage space. And I have seen the future, Aubrey. I have been to Northern Europe, and EVs are ubiquitous, and the charging infrastructure is ubiquitous. They are 10 years ahead of us, literally. I was also a Model Y owner for a year and a half, and I understand intimately the good, the bad, and the ugly of owning an EV and traveling around the Midwest and traveling long distances to the East Coast. And mostly it really worked. But ultimately, range anxiety did kill the Model Y for me, because I go to rural parts of the upper Midwest. But Aubrey, I digress. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you started 3V.
Definitely. And we hear everything from clients of whether they've had an EV or, as you've done, so it's not the time, but maybe later. And then we have clients that own 2 EVs per household. So it really changes and depends on people's driving habits. But yeah, so Aubrey Gunnels, I'm the founder and co-founder and CEO of 3V. We are a charge point operator, so a CPO for level 2 charging. Level 2 charging, for any guests that don't know, it's you charge your car at about 4 to 6 hours when it's at rest. So similar to how you would charge your phone when you're sleeping or at work, etc. And we own and operate chargers, especially in the multifamily space, is where we're focusing now. And we're really trying to bridge the gap of access to chargers for people that live in multifamily buildings. About 31% of Americans live in multifamily buildings. Only about 5% of those buildings have chargers right now. And we also know about 80% of charging happens at home. So as we look at EV adoption and who owns an EV, it's very highly skewed towards single-family homeowners. So we're really built out to do so. I would say me and my co-founder got into the space by I was working at a C&I solar fund. And then my co-founder Ben was working at a EV charging software company. And we were really focusing in this level two space, and it became very clear that there was just a lack of infrastructure dollars in the space. There's a lot of hardware providers. It's almost a commodity. There's a lot of software vendors, but really there's a big gap in thinking about level two charging as an infrastructure. And it functions kind of like infrastructure, as in it's a long hold asset. It requires construction, et cetera, but it is consumer driven risk. It is small checks times thousands of properties, which is a little bit different than other types of infrastructure. So really trying to redefine the market in that sense.
Yeah, when I got my EV, I installed a level 2 charger. This is a 50 amp charger that I put in my garage. It was about $500 all in. I hired an electrician. I just put a big 50 amp plug and then plugged my Tesla into that. It worked great. But it does take several hours to charge the vehicle. You don't want to try to charge your EV on level 1 if you're traveling any kind of distances. That's just a joke, in my opinion. No bueno. But level 2 is the real deal, and most people do charge their EVs at home. The average commute in America is like 40 miles, I think, something like that, right? So it's totally doable. But if you don't own your home, you can't necessarily make an upgrade to the garage or whatever you have access to and install a level 2 charger. And so that is an impediment for renters or multifamily dwellers. As you indicated, 30% of our population. That's a big chunk of our population. So we desperately need more EV infrastructure in a multifamily space. What is the basic business model that 3V is chasing?
Yep. And even to piggyback on what you just said, it's not that real estate owners haven't tried to tackle this issue. It is to work across most real estate portfolio owners own properties across states. So to install across jurisdictions, to install at scale, to install across a portfolio requires almost an entire person that's dedicated to that rollout, and the ROI doesn't normally meet that. So we've just seen a lot of struggle across the industry of whether to prioritize it and how it affects NOI and things of that nature. So that's kind of where we see the value prop. But what we do is we provide all the CapEx and all the OpEx, so absolutely no cost to the property. And the drivers pay for electricity through the chargers we install. So say the building blended rate is about like 12 cents, then we'll charge an extra 20 cents on top of that. And that is what goes back to paying down the infrastructure costs there. So that way it's no cost again to the property. And we'll continue to operate the asset over the life of a 10-year, 12-year contract.
And so have you ever done an analysis of how this plays out for consumers? Like the relative cost of charging using this financial model versus if I were to be able to do it in my garage using just the cost of the electricity, right? There's some additional expense here because presumably the consumer is paying for the infrastructure upgrade as well, right?
Yeah, I would say compared to a single family home, I wouldn't say it's like comparable because you're paying for the electricity and you paid for the upgrade, et cetera. Mm-hmm. When it comes to comparing it to level 3 charging, so like superchargers, we definitely hit a lower cost per kW than those sites. And then you also don't have the sunk cost of time of sitting at a supercharger for 45 minutes versus you can just charge it when you park and go up to bed and wake up the next day. Yeah. So there's that. And then I would also say, charger reliability is a huge piece of EV charging. EV charging is notorious for a bad experience. And we think that's because of two things. One, it comes down to the economics. If no one is incentivized to maintain those chargers, then the chargers go down. That's how capitalism works. Mm-hmm. So early days, there were a lot of bad deals that were done that the contracts just couldn't be maintained. And then the other piece is we have to continue to invest in maintenance and making sure that they are up and someone that is responsible and economically responsible for them to be working. So I'll just say the consumers can have more time. Like they don't spend as much time at chargers to do so. And then two, it's still more cost effective than to one, definitely drive an ICE vehicle, so a combustion engine vehicle, and then two, compared to just relying on the supercharger network.
Yeah, it really adds insult to injury when you're looking for a charger and you finally find one and then it's dysfunctional for some reason, out of commission. And that did happen a few times to me. I was mostly just charging at Teslas, and I have to say the Tesla infrastructure seemed pretty reliable, but it was also fairly new. So I don't know how it's aging. But the other thing that I think about around this is, how do you decide, based on the number of units in a building, for example, or a complex, what number of chargers you want to install? What is a sweet spot?
Yeah, so we are very data driven when it comes to how many we charge, just because we're investors. We have to, that's a huge driver of how many chargers to install, because it is directly correlated to our CapEx. And I would say we know that, the demand in LA is very different than the demand in Charlotte. So we use hyper-focused localized data of current EV registration within a half-mile square radius, and then apply growth curves of how we anticipate that penetration at the address level to be. And then from there, we have a lot of assumptions around how many KW, what is the KW demand at that property, based off of the number of people that live in that building, based off of the number of existing drivers, based off of what we see as battery efficiency, what we see as the vehicle's miles traveled for this kind of building. So I would say, like, if you live 30 minutes outside the city, you're probably more likely to be a commuter, versus if you live in the middle of the city, your vehicle's miles traveled is statistically lower. So really taking into account what is the type of demographic at that building, in order to make sure that what we're building meets the need, both from a not to overbuild, but also certainly not to underbuild.
Right. And is there some kind of a rule of thumb, though, that, okay, if there's 30 units or 100 units in a building, you will try to include 10% of the parking spots with electric charging, or what is that rule of thumb?
The rule of thumb is like so location dependent. So I would say, like, we on average would install like 6 to 10 on an average of like a 200 unit property.
Okay.
So, and the reason we do that is, one, we are taking inherent risk by building before demand exists. A lot, like the majority of EV drivers, again, live in a single family home. So we're making an upfront investment with the anticipation that EV drivers will live there. Each property is going to have its own story of when that happens. We also know that people buy EVs in the same way that you buy a piece of tech. It's because someone recommends it to you, because a friend like vouches for it, because a cousin said something. It's really hyper dependent. And I've talked to many of different investment funds about this, and they've said they've continued, especially across Europe, because as you stated at the beginning, we're 5 to 10 years behind. So just trying to find analytic trends of how we can tell where is EV adoption going to happen, and the answer is it's too impossible to tell. Like, there's no statistical, except for if there's of course like policy, if that really resonates. So like California.
And so then I guess let's talk about how you're attacking the market. I would imagine that you're finding big real estate companies that own many assets and trying to do some kind of a master's level service agreement or something like that.
Yeah, we work with large real estate portfolios. So we have two segments. One is about 50, I would say 50 in the the whale segment, that is over 100 properties in their portfolio, versus we have, a list of 500 multifamily owners that own on average of 12 properties. So we work across the gamut, but we also can take a lot of lessons learned from EV charging companies over the last 5 years. And we know that going door knocking is the ROI on a sales team isn't there. And that's also how you kill a company, because of headcount. So really working at the portfolio level, we found, is how we can achieve it at the multifamily.
Okay. And here's a geeky question that my listeners will appreciate, though. So is the electrical infrastructure, like the service to the building, a barrier? Like, do you have to make service upgrades in the amperage of the service to the building to achieve this, or is that generally not a problem?
It really depends on the class of property. So, for instance, Class C properties or properties that are built like in the 70s and before, those we have found to not have enough available power.
Hmm.
And that's also, but if you add some load sharing software on top, then it kind of depends. I would say most Class A and Class B types of properties, there's enough house power to build, especially this first tranche of chargers.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 8 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. I've noticed that there's also like smart panel upgrades of various flavors. Some are, putting a device between the meter and the panel. Some are replacing the guts of the panel with smarter technology that is more dynamic. Is that something that you're also doing, or are you just looking for this sweet spot of, okay, the infrastructure is good and we're going to add charge point chargers? Boom.
Yeah, and we work with all kinds of different charging partners, but I would say they all have load management capabilities, and that is so that way they can split a circuit if needed and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I would say from like a microgrid, adding in a battery and things of that nature. The data would have to exist in a really meaningful way for us to do that in the first tranche of installation. But say we go back because demand has hit a certain threshold and we need to build more chargers, but there's not available power, then the ROI on the microgrid, like installing a battery, starts to make a little bit more sense.
Okay. And what kind of traction are you getting?
It's been interesting. I would say everyone is interested in providing the best amenity to their residents and to stay competitive in the space. And they're certainly it's very competitive to have chargers at your property, and people do make decisions based off of it. There was a recent survey from Greystar that 27% of renters care if there's an EV charger or not at their properties. But also the asset management teams of these large real estate REITs have a lot going on, and EV charging is not normally in the top 5. So it's really moving through the process to make it a priority to really make a compelling case of why needs to be addressed today rather than waiting another year. I would also say we have a number of clients that have tried a rollout process, and it was really burdensome and have had just like bad experiences trying to make this work across their portfolios. And the ROI is, again, pretty light, that they're really looking for an outsourced solution that is our sole job is to make sure those chargers are working and providing a reliable amenity.
Mm-hmm. And is your business model to own the charging infrastructure or eventually sell it to the facility owner?
We'll own it over the life of the asset. We'll continue to own them.
Got it. So check out 3V Infrastructure, just like it sounds, numeral 3V infrastructure.com. You'll immediately see what we're talking about here. There's a great shot of a parking deck, obviously inside some kind of a high-rise building, and you've got a bunch of green painted parking spots with conduit running down the poles, the columns in the parking structure. So it looks like it works pretty well. It folds into the existing infrastructure pretty nicely, in my opinion. Of course, it's a lot of electrical work, but c'est la vie, right? That's what we're talking about. And I would imagine that this amenity for consumers allows them to, charge more or promote the property as a luxury property, perhaps. So, what is the response you're getting from the multifamily real estate owners?
As far as,
Well, how do they see this? Do they get this light bulb for example, that I just had about, well, yeah, this is a nice amenity. People are going to buy EVs, despite the ups and downs, right? There's turbulence in the electrification of transportation market. Companies are coming and going, but there's going to be this long-term trend because of the cost of EVs, right? Ultimately, EVs are going to be much more economical to own and operate for consumers and fleet owners, period. Fewer moving parts, lower cost of energy, boom, done, happens, right? You can't stop this transition. You can accelerate it by providing incentives, and that's what Northern Europe has done. And maybe some states and cities in the U.S. have done this, but we don't have great incentives. I don't know, from your perspective, what you think about the incentives for EV infrastructure. But yeah, how do the real estate owners respond to this?
yeah, definitely. I can address both. I would say they definitely, real estate owners try to increase NOI, which is basically how much they are providing enterprise value to their buildings in order to, like, that is the real estate market, right? Because they buy and sell a lot and things of that nature to stay competitive in the space. And EV chargers do add to NOI. So it's the availability of the best amenities and reliable amenities is certainly something they're interested in. They also would never want to lose a potential resident because they didn't have chargers there. And especially if it's very achievable to install chargers there. So we're definitely getting, like, they see the need as much as we see the need, and are very amenable to trying to do a full scale rollout.
Is there other infrastructure that they're installing in their facilities that's analogous, where there's a third party owned infrastructure?
Laundry is kind of the best analogy, I would say. If you have
Okay.
shared laundry service, that's normally completely outsourced. And someone maintains those over time, and it's, full function. That's one of the older ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also things like package lockers that is also kind of similar because
Yeah.
they're owned by an outside party, and
Okay.
they get a cut of the profit share and things like that. So
And what about incentives? Is the IRA juicing this industry?
I would say largely 3V, we underwrote this business that with turbulence in mind. It's a space that we've seen a lot of players come and go.
Mm-hmm.
And that is and so we were really conservative in how we looked at the business to get into it. So we are not directly reliant on subsidies. We'll take free money all day long, but that is not necessarily what's driving our economics.
Mm-hmm.
I would say and I would also, the level 2 space was largely, I don't want to say forgotten in the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill. It was really around providing reliable public level 3 supercharging in areas that the private sector wouldn't touch. So those programs are important, but just further makes the case of why private charging is even more important now, as we go through shifts in Washington. And I would say that actually the most meaningful subsidies out there are through utilities. Utilities are various utilities around the U.S., whether it's Xcel, PG&E, et cetera, are really trying to make sure that as we build out EV charging infrastructure, it's done in a reliable way that they have some control over. And that's really created more subsidies available in that capacity as well. The Inflation Reduction Act, what impacts us the most is we care about affordable EVs. And as affordable EVs continue to hit the market, that is reliant on battery factories to continue to come online in the US, and really watching out for how these EV factories continue to be built, that some of that is coming from both chips and the Inflation Reduction Act.
Quite a bit of turbulence in the battery industry too. I just noted that Freyr the Norwegian battery company that was going to build a gigafactory in Georgia to make batteries here in the U.S. has rebranded. I think it's something like 3T. I can't remember exactly, but they're a solar company now. They're not just a battery company. And I guess, what is America doing right to make this, to ease this transition, and what do we need to do better?
Let's see. One, I guess from the battery side, battery prices are dropping significantly every year, and that's the main cost of an EV. So as we see those drive down, the cost of EVs are going to drive down. I would say what a lot of questions we get are, what does the EV market look like under this new administration? And the answer is it's still up and to the right. The question is how to the right and how up. Mm-hmm. And that is really driven by, the U.S. automotive sector has to be competitive with China. China can create electric vehicles for cheaper than we can create ICE vehicles, so combustion engine vehicles. Mm-hmm. And if they want to compete on a global scale, they need to continue to their path toward creating the latest and greatest EV models. Every report and narrative right now is very much saying that. Even like GM, for instance, has come out very strongly that they're going to continue their EV program in the same caliber. Mm-hmm. So it's not and no EV person is sitting here being like 100% of the US fleet is going to be EV. Even if 20% of the EV of the US fleet, so all vehicles on the road are EV, that is 20% of cars need to be able to have a place to get fuel, and that is EV charging. So we think that's really important. And then as we see public programs go away, we really need to prioritize getting private investment in the EV space and to not be scared of the space. The space is certainly still growing, and the underwriting is not simple, but it's certainly achievable if everyone takes a finance eye to it.
So what else should our listeners know in our last couple of minutes together, Aubrey?
Let's see. One, they should buy an EV. And if they live in a if they live in a multifamily building, they should absolutely contact their property manager, who should contact their property owner, who should say that they should go talk to 3V. I think the more that we can also create demand is the faster our clients are ready to move. So sure. The more that, it's asked for, the more it helps us, I guess. But obviously I'm just trying to put chargers in the ground. And I think we will continue to see a very large shift in available EV chargers in the US, and that will just give consumers more confidence to buy an EV. For sure. Yeah. And the more that we can have reliable information on how to take care of an EV and things like when you rent an EV, to have that experience to be even better, then I think, or even it's been interesting to even see Uber is a lot of times the first time people ever ride in a Tesla. Mm-hmm. And that creates more drive in the market. And mm-hmm. the more that we can expose people that EVs are really great cars, and again, the more that we can drive adoption is really what we're after. But
I take a lot of Ubers, and I travel around the country quite a bit. Mm. The only state where I see a lot of electric Ubers is California.
Mm. New York, there's quite a bit now too.
California did incentivize EV sales, and I think they're still sunsetting ICE engine sales. Are they not?
I think that's gonna be
pushed back.
But I would say regardless of incentives, there's going to be plenty of adoption. So yeah.
So is there, when analysts look at the adoption of EVs, like the sales of EVs versus infrastructure, are they tracking well enough, or is infrastructure lagging?
Infrastructure is severely lagging. And that's for a variety. Yeah.
Okay. Hence the business opportunity.
Yes.
Absolutely. Anything else?
No, I appreciate you taking time to talk to me. It's also fun. Your name's Tim. My dad's name is Tim. So,
awesome. I love running into other Tims. Well, check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love hearing from my listeners. You can also find us at cleanpowerhour.com. Give us a rating and a review on Apple or Spotify. Follow us on YouTube. And Aubrey, how can our listeners find you?
LinkedIn, or you can find me on the website. And yeah.
Awesome. With that, I will say I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Thank you so much, Aubrey Gunnels. The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 8 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more.